Hello and good morning everybody, and welcome to this ISM webinar. I know you'll get plenty of practical advice from today's session, which you can start applying to own roles straight away. My name is Adam, I'm Head of Marketing here at the ISM, and this webinar, once delivered, will be made available on demand as soon as we finish, so you can watch it as many times as you like and at your own convenience. During the webinar, you'll be able to ask as many questions as you like by typing them into the box above. We will answer any questions you have at the end, so please take a moment of your time to look through as well all the attachments and links that we've attached to this webinar. There are also a couple of attachments from the presenter as well. To introduce our presenter, Tim is a sales performance specialist consultant. He has a career in business development and management spanning 30 years, during which time he has been a top-performing sales director, established and run courses on sales and management within the many varied business sectors, and trained at a number of top management colleges. He specializes in sales and management workshops and coaching to a wide variety of different sectors to widely respected sales performance consultants. He is also an ISM Fellow. So Tim is the next voice you'll hear. I hope you enjoy this webinar. It is a rerun of a webinar that we ran yesterday, hence the date on the slide. And Tim is the next voice you'll hear. Over to you, Tim.
Fantastic. Thanks, Adam, and welcome everybody. And thanks for many of you coming back from yesterday. Really appreciate that. We had a few technical difficulties yesterday, but we're all set to go here. Just a little bit to introduce what we're going to talk today, and you'll see here that it says the 7 ways to build rapport and increase sales. Now, rapport is a particularly interesting subject to me personally and my background, because probably like many of you, rapport was something that I looked at many years ago, and some of my training initially in sales was all about building relationships and rapport. But today we're going to look at these 4 aspects of rapport. First, to understand what it is, what we mean by it, or rather what we really mean by it. Then we're going to look at research for what's really interesting in general life, both in terms of business-to-business decisions, and also generally as a human being. Now, you'll notice here on point 3, my background is I'm a scientist by background. I've also studied a little bit of neuroscience and NLP as well. And I was particularly interested in how the research behind rapport affects us, and where, if you like, the evidence is about rapport and the way it affects the B2B decisions. So that's number 3 on our agenda. And then 4, lastly, we're going to look at the 4 principles of rapport and how we build rapport around those 4 principles. Some of which may be something you know already, but there may very well be some new stuff as well. So this is what I consider rapport to be. It's an investment. I think at the end of the day, rapport is about investing your time and energy in order to build a relationship. Now, why is that important? I hear you asking. Now, the other thing we may have is a slightly jaded view of the subject. And we may consider rapport a little bit of a soft subject. It's obviously been around quite a while. And there's quite a few things. Adam, could you put yourself on mute? Thanks. That's brilliant. Thanks, Adam. We may have a slightly jaded view of the subject because there's an awful lot of evidence, there's a lot of training about building relationships. So we may say, yeah, I know all about it. You know, I build relationships with people. But this webinar is about actually where's the hard facts behind it. And as I say, as a scientist myself, I looked at some of the evidence behind the reason why rapport is important. Now, some of you may remember this back in 2012. There was a Harvard Business Review article published by the Corporate Executive Board, which are now part of Gartner, that says this: it was the end of solution sales. And one of the very, very famous quotes in there is that selling is not about relationships. Now, this caused a big change. This caused a lot of people either to say, what on earth are they talking about? What are they saying? There's a lot of controversy about it. Now, I actually happen to believe believe a lot of the stuff that the Corporate Executive Board and their book that came out, which is obviously about the Challenger sale, which some of you may have come across, actually a very, very good book. So I'm not decrying that book at all. I think it's excellent. I've read through it. I think some of the elements good. But there are lots of people who felt that statement there, that selling is not about relationships, to be totally contrary to what their feelings were. An actual fact, and further studies of what the Corporate Executive Board and the Challenger sale is talking is it's not just about relationships. What they're saying now is that in order to compete, in order to make themselves competitive in the world of sales at the moment, it's not just about building relationships with people, and it's not just about finding needs and solving them with the solutions that we can offer as a salesperson. What it's really saying is you have to make a difference and differentiate yourselves. Now, this today is not about the Challenger sale. This web is not about the Challenger sale. But later on, we'll be looking for some of the other evidence around what they're saying as well. Now, just to get a little bit of background about myself, as Adam very kindly said, I'm a sales performance consultant, and I'm currently working with the Rain Group, who also look at this kind of insight selling, which we're going to look at the evidence a bit further. And one of the books that the Rain Group published was called Insight Selling, which it stated this: relationships are not debt, but an important part of the whole story. And I'd urge you to look at this book, and perhaps if you want the Challenger sale as well, and have a look through that what insight selling is really about. Later on in today, we'll be looking at insight in a little bit more detail. But first of all, before we do, let's understand what rapport is. Those of you that are language experts will probably realize that it comes from the French word for en rapport or rapporteur, which to bring back. And in fact, these days, in French itself, it has a slightly more closer and more intimate relationship than the one we need. But you can see on the screen here that what we mean by rapport is a close and harmonious relationship. The groups of people understand each other's feelings as well, communicate well. Now, my view on rapport is a bit like oil in a car. You put too little in and the engine seizes. And also, you put too much in and actually the engine doesn't do the engine any good at all. And rapport or relationships are really, really important for a number of reasons. And we're going to look at those in a bit. But the key thing is, remember that we can sometimes have too much rapport. And sometimes we have too much rapport and we treat the person almost as a friend. It can actually destroy whatever opportunity commercially as well, because we stop thinking with our rational brain, which is what we want to think about a little bit later as well. So let's look at the research about what really influences us as human beings. What some of you may have come across is this chap, Robert Cialdini. He produced a book called The Psychology of Influence a few years ago. And he looked at 6 fundamentals that influence people. And he called them shortcuts. And there's some wonderful stuff on YouTube about this. So you get an opportunity, search this up on Psychology of Influence, Robert Cialdini on YouTube. And there's a brilliant caricature cartoon video script on that about this that explains it. But just to summarize those 6 fundamentals, or shortcuts as he called them, that we all go through, let's look at some of the 6. The first one is this: we are programmed as human beings psychologically to give back when we receive. In other words, if somebody does us a favor, somebody gives us a gift or sends us an invitation, psychologically we feel indebted to them. And this means in sales, if we do somebody, a customer, a favor, it means they're psychologically indebted to help us and work with us. So that's the first principle, which is called reciprocation. We reciprocate what's been given to us. Let's look at the second one. Second one is the scarcity. Now, you remember, if you go into, or you've ever been into a supermarket and looked for your favorite brand of, I don't know, shampoo or wine or I don't know, any form of produce in a supermarket, and you go along there, you look on the shelf, and you notice there are only 2 left there. What do you tend to do? If it's your favourite, you're worried about it running out, what your tendency, apparently according to the psychologist, is to get both just in case. We want more of something there's less of. And you'll see this all over the place. A lot of organizations use this scarcity principle, buy now before it runs out, buy now because it's a limited time offer. All those are based on this single principle of scarcity. And just like water in a desert, we want more of what there is less of, is the expression he used. Number 3 is authority. And this is all about us respecting the authority of others, the credibility of others as well. Now, there are several ways this can be used in sales. Authority could be a general better knowledge than the person. And the expression is you only need to know 1% better than your customer, then you're considered an authority. But here we're talking about being an actual authority in their business and looking at some of the challenger research as an authority in not what you know to be solving their problem, but the future issues they may have, and giving them, as we say, insight as to your authority. Now, the interesting thing here, Cialdini did an experiment around this. What Cialdini did is he took an estate agency, or because he was American, it was a real estate agency, but he took this basic estate agent and he studied the telephone calls coming in. And like any estate agency, people would ring in and say, I'd like to have my house appraised or valued, as we'd probably use in the UK. And the response was monitored from the receptionist. What they found is, if the receptionist says, yes, I'll just put you through to the right department, they got a certain number of valuations and inquiries upgraded to appointments. But if they say to that person, yes, I'll put you through to our expert, John, who's had 20 years experience in your area and who's a real authority or an expert in that area, they found, even though the customer knew this was biased information, they found the customer was 20% more likely to go ahead as a result of it. And they did a controlled experiment between the two. 20% more likely because the receptionist said this person is a real expert in your area. They believe them, which is fantastic. Which means any of you who's in sales may want to think about this as one of the things that you do is promoting your own experts within the business. Okay, let's move on to number 4, commitment and consistency. Now, this is not just commitment and consistency from us. In other words, what I'm saying is, it's probably a given, and you probably sit and say, yeah, you've got to be committed and consistent to the customer. That's absolutely true. You've got to show that you're committed to helping them and consistent in your actions and coming back, doing what you say you're going to do. But Cialdini did something different. He looked at, really interesting, the customer's commitment. And what he says there, if you can get a customer to commit to a small step, the larger step, in other words, the purchase, is so much easier to get. And you'll see this in all sorts of ways that are prevalent at the moment within sales. What he did is he studied people who were allowing a political campaign to put stickers in the window. Now, what was interesting is that what they did is they went down the street and they said to the people, would you mind putting a small sticker in the window to support a political party, whatever that party may be? And the people who said yes and put a small sticker in their window were much more likely to the larger commitment of putting a flag, that is a board, outside their house because of that first commitment. And what Cialdini said is that if you put people through small steps of commitment, they feel they need to behave in such a way they're consistent with their previous actions. In other words, give them a small commitment, they're more likely to do a big commitment in our language. So there's 4 of the 6 fundamentals that Cialdini was looking at. And the last two, last but one, the penultimate one, consensus of opinion. Or the psychologists call it normative social influence. And this is just a way of them saying that we're more likely to do what everybody else is doing because we want to fit in. And this is most likely, you probably see it and probably remember it yourself, is during our teenage years, we're more likely to be influenced by our peers because we want to fit in. That's where it hides us because we want to feel part of a group. But even beyond that, when we're working and when we're living, we want to fit in with what's being done. So much so that if you suddenly see a lot of people going out of the room when you're sitting in a room, you think to yourself, why are these people all doing this? There must be a reason behind that doing that. Again, walking into supermarkets, if one brand is really popular and sold out, back of your mind, you think, actually, why is that so popular? Why is everybody going for that? And that, sometimes called cognitive dissonance, means that people are more likely to do that if they can see that everybody else is doing it. Another way of doing this is case studies. If we can prove that we have a fantastic case study behind and other people are using our services, then it's more likely to convince people that they should use this as well. Logos, brands, things like that. And you know, if you walk into, I don't know, you're buying a new TV, you walk into a TV showroom and you ask the person, which brand should I buy? Which TV do you recommend? They say, well, this one here, the Mega Brand 2000, is our most popular brand because everybody likes this, this, and this. Guess what? You're more likely to buy that one because everybody else is buying it. So that's some examples of consensus opinion. But the last, and not by means the least, is this. And this is what we're studying today, is this factor which is about liking someone. If you like someone, then you're more likely to buy from them. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail, look at some of the elements behind it, because I know you're probably sitting there and thinking, I know that already. We've talked about rapport and we know that's important. But let's look at some of the fundamentals of it. Whether somebody likes you or doesn't, prize how the selling process will go. Remember I said about oil in an engine, that the selling process goes much, much easier if you've got rapport with people. And also, mostly important to it, the buyer's decision process. In a world where we're trying to differentiate ourselves, one of the fundamental factors, as we'll see in a moment, is whether they feel they can work with you. And we know from our own previous experience working with people, if you don't like somebody, you're unlikely to be working with them, and also you're unlikely to make a decision to work with them as alone. And there is some hard facts around this. There is some research that's been done on several places looking at whether people like people and whether they're actually going to work with them. If we move on here, some of the outcomes of rapport lead to the following. They talk to you more, they're sharing more information with you, they buy from you, they feel loyal to you, and also, really, really importantly for us as sales teams, they also introduce you to other people as well. And they do all this on people they like. So going back to our basic premise, relationships are not dead. They're part of the picture of sales. So not only are they important, they can actually influence the sale quite incredibly as well. Let's look at some more of that research around looking at about rapport. Here's some research done by the Rain Group of Center of Excellence for sales research based in Boston. And what they said is that building rapport can have some very important outcomes. What they asked people was, okay, how many people do you think are trustworthy, just to the general public? And you can see on the slide, the answer was about 30%. But if they ask the same question of people you know, and I should add like, are trustworthy, the answer came out as 70%. People trust people they like. Now that's really important because not only have we got to like people, we've got to trust them as well. Because one of the fundamentals here is actually, not only do I like you, but actually, do I believe what you're telling me? Because we know that part of sales is convincing people. We know that we've got to convince them in a way that not only they like us, but they trust us. So that's really important. And looking at some other research that was done by the RAIN Group, how clients buy, 26% of the respondents to this survey said there was no personal chemistry in the buying situation. So therefore, they did not choose that person. But they would consider purchasing, 85% of those people would consider purchasing if a strong personal chemistry was established. So that's one bit of research that was done by the RAIN Group. What is also interesting is other research that was done by the same people. A little bit more recently, the RAIN Group Central Sales Research did some more research on this and said, what do sales winners do differently to the also-rans? So what they did is they contacted over 700 buyers and the purchasers and studied this. Over 3.1 billion in products and services across the globe, all sorts of industries, multiple industries, all complex B2B decisions, all within the field that we're interested. But what the interesting thing they found about this, over the 300 buyer conversations, it didn't matter the geography, it didn't matter the size of the company, it didn't matter what kind of products, whether product services, consultancy, solutions, whatever, the answers were very strongly correlated to these results. So, what they did is they asked these people, what were the number one factors for you to actually make the difference between the first person you chose and who was second in line, if you like. Now, we all know in sales there isn't such thing as a second place. There is only a first place. You either win or you don't, unless you're actually going to go, bid dually with somebody else and work with somebody else in a collaborative way as another supplier. But generally, you either win it or you don't. So they said, what was the difference of the people who won and the people who didn't win in the second place? And these were the answers. Number 5, they understood my needs. Now we know that. From solution selling, we've got to understand people's needs. Number 4, they'd listen to me. Now, number 3, interestingly, they persuaded me we would achieve results. Not only did they listen to me and understood my needs, which is basically around solution selling, but they also persuaded me we would achieve results. A lot of this is by providing examples of where we were before and the kind of results that make sense to the people in front of us in their industry, relevant to their situation, that they're actually going to achieve the results you say they're going to achieve. Now, that's not promising they're going to achieve results, but we know we can't do that. We know we can't promise people that we're going to achieve results in there unless we're really confident. But, what happens if you don't achieve results could be a bit of a problem. So that's number 3. Number 2 was collaborated with me, which is really important. We'll look down a little bit further. Not only did they do all the rest of it, but the second most important thing was collaboration. They wanted to make sure that people were going to work with them in the future. And around this collaboration is the word flexibility as well. So although you know the way things should be done, you should be flexible about working to a client situation. But number 1, top of the hit parade, is educating me with new ideas and perspectives. New ideas and perspectives. So this is what everybody, the challenger sale we are calling at RAIN Group, is called insight. Providing insight to people as to how they can change their view. So insight is about giving them information, and we'll see in a little bit more details about insight, that they didn't know already. And that's the essential difference between insight selling and solution selling. And in the download, if you want to download the book called The Future of Consultative Selling, it's explained a little bit further. And some of this research is in there. So you're welcome to contact me at the RAIN Group, Tim Roberts at the RAIN Group, or contact me on LinkedIn if you want to discuss this any further around some of these attributes that's come around that research. Because it's really fascinating about some of the elements to that. And if we not only took the top 5, but actually look at the top 10 elements, you'll see there are quite a few other ones in there. The overall value was superior, connected to me personally. number 9 in there, depicts a purchasing process accurately. Compelling solution. Avoid pitfalls were the other 5 things. So not only were they giving insights, right, but they're helping avoid pitfalls as well. So those are the top 10 of that research. But number 1, going back to number 1, educating in new ideas, perspectives, giving insight to people. However, we got a little bit of a careful about this. Because when I first came across that, and I'll be honest with you, when I first read that, it sounded as though, from the CEB, they were telling us, it sounded, and it's not necessarily true, as they were telling us that we've got to tell customers what they've got to do. Well, that's not necessarily true in my view. Yes, we've got to tell them, but if you can imagine you go to somebody and actually say to them, hey, you know what you've got to do in your firm, you've got to do this, this, and this, they're not going to listen to us unless we have the basic relationship with them so they understand they can work with us. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about some of the fundamentals of the reason why somebody should listen to us in the first place. Often the expression is used, you've got to earn the right to give this information. You've got to earn the right to give them the insight, because otherwise they're going to listen to it anyway. You turn around and say to them, hey, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to be doing, and teach them. They're going to be like this chap in the photograph here. He's basically going to turn around and say, I don't like you. You're arrogant. I'm not going to listen to you. So in order to be listened to with insight, we've actually got to build the rapport, the trust, all the rest of it in the first place before people. We've got to show that we've got the authority, we've got to show work collaboratively, all those elements as well. But the differentiating factor of both our studies in the Rain Group and also CV studies as well, to be fair, say that it's not just about asking what their problems are and providing solutions. You've got to be giving them insight, something different about the way they act, something different about their business, their industry that they didn't know. So we take some of those elements, 4, 5, 7, and 9, all of those are around rapport. Listen to me, understood my needs, compelling solution, crafting a compelling solution, and that compelling solution is about relationships, and connected to me personally are all about the elements of rapport. So the research here says of those 10 things here, 5 of them, or 4 of them in this case, are about relationships and rapport in the first place. So let's look at rapport a little bit further and look at some of the elements here about trust. A little bit earlier I said that rapport builds trust. You like somebody that you're going to trust them. And there was some more research, and you can tell I'm actually quite interested in the research, being a former scientist myself. When we trust somebody, there are a few things that happen here. You're better and more positive, and you see there's a reference to where this came from. And thank you for allowing me to use this. We feel willing and empowered to work on issues and challenges. We engage best thinking, strategic and innovative thinking as well. We open ourselves to new experiences and link with others in synchronicity. Now, these all 5 things are what we want our customers to feel when they engage with us. And so it's really important that we build rapport and that this trust is there. Now, there's also some research that's been done about avoiding distrust and then build trust. So make sure that we're doing the best things first and then to build the trust. So what contributes to distrust first? Something that threatens how we perceive ourselves, our identity. Now this is where we've got to be careful, because there is a danger if we start giving people or educating them, as I said a little bit earlier, that we may change how they feel about themselves and I thought I knew my industry, I thought I knew my business. So this is the reason why it's got to be done with relationships and rapport first, because we don't want people to feel like this. We want them to go have that aha moment. We don't want to push them out of the path and say, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm changing my identity. We want them to go so far in thinking, actually, I need to listen to this person, but we don't want them to distrust us. We don't want to feel that risk, judgmental, unfair, dishonest, uncertainty about the future. We do want a certain amount of uncertainty, but not a massive amount. And this is interesting. Distrust is sometimes about the reality does not match our expectations. In other words, what we thought was going to be happening isn't happening. And this is about risk for ourselves. And we'll look at the neuroscience about this in a minute. We also distrust people who we think are going to manipulate us. Now, I mentioned before that I'm a NLP master practitioner. Actually, I worked for about a year with some of the top NLP practitioners. Now, some of you who've been through NLP or neuro-linguistic programming understand it's about communication. And one of the things I heard fairly recently, which I actually believe, is that some of NLP or neuro-linguistic programming has got a bit of a bad reputation because it was seen as a way of manipulating people. This was not the intent of the original people. The original people who started NLP were thinking about improving communication, not trying to manipulate us. And it got extrapolated into the form of sales as to how we can make people do what we want them to do. The problem if we try and manipulate people is that at the end of the day, they know they're being manipulated in the long run. And it's a very short-term thing. We've got to be linking the long-term. And relationships about the long-term. And also not being included, also feels distrust as well. And what builds trust? Transparency about feelings, fears, expectation, open-mindedness, feeling someone is listening, really listening to us, feeling like what we say has value. Now, going back to what we're talking about, insight, and there's a big element about insight, and you can tell I'm an insight selling consultant as well. We have to respect the people, our customers, prospects. We cannot patronize or belittle them. Otherwise, they will distrust us and feel resentment to us. So it's really important if you read any of the books, ours or the Insight Selling book, that you understand that it's really important that you do all these things before you try and give them some insight. And you've also got to check that insight. So as well as giving them information they didn't know, is to check with them that actually that they're finding the same, or that this may be the case with their firm. So, what also is around collaboration. So this research supports some of the other research that's saying that last point on the screen here, being part of creating a shared vision of mutual success. We know from basic psychology, people are more likely to buy in to a project if they feel they're being part of the creation. It's a basic management tool. If you want a team to do something, make it their idea. Ask them what they think we should be doing and shape it. It's the same with customers. Think of different ways that we can create that and maybe shape the direction of that decision. So, let's move on. We've looked at what Rapport is, we've looked at the research of what really interests us. Let's now look at the neuroscience based on that B2B decisions. Again, some research has been done on neuroscience, and there's particular interest to myself, because part of the background as a scientist is interest in how the brain works. So, anybody wants a further conversation, by all means, contact me and we can have some more in-depth discussions. We haven't got time now to go through absolutely everything that we can on this, but by all means, contact me in the future. So, what does neuroscience tell us about Rapport? Well, it tells us a few things. It tells us, firstly, that it confirms what we probably know already. Everybody makes decisions based on emotion and then rationalize it later. You think about it. Anybody thinks actually that's a good decision in the back of their mind because it's a safe decision, for instance. The fact that they feel comfortable is an emotional decision. In fact, any decision where they think, well, actually it's the rational choice, again, they feel comfortable. Notice the word feel comfortable, that it's the rational choice to do. but emotion plays a strong part in all our decisions. And it provides twice the impact that business value does on the B2B purchase, according to this research. And what's this saying is, if we can get people to feel comfortable, feel encouraged, feel motivated, feel that this is part of their future, then they're more likely to purchase from us. So Rapport is not just purely about building relationships, and we'll look at the ways you can do that a little bit later. It's about making people feel good about the future, making them feel good. Okay, initially they may feel concerned, but feel that there is a new reality possible for them if they are concerned about something as well. So emotional decisions are really important. If we look at the emotional centers of the brain, and sometimes called the limbic system, and some of you may be aware of this as well. And interestingly, if you look at the olfactory bulb, which is basically our smell, it shows also the reason why a lot of us actually are very highly get memories from smells, because it's part of this emotional. It's very highly linked to the emotional part of the brain. Let's look at bits of this. Some of you may be aware at the bottom of something called amygdala. A chap called Daniel Goleman looked at emotional intelligence. He put a famous book that came out a few years ago about emotional intelligence, and he named this at the center of our emotional decision making. So let's look at some of these areas and say, what role do they play in business-to-business decisions? Well, the thing is this. If we look at what happens is that when we see a threat, and we'll look at this a little bit more detail, to us, the response which comes from the amygdala to that threat is instantaneous. For instance, you're standing at a curb, you're just about to walk off that curb, and suddenly you see a car coming at you at great speed. Your response is immediate. You move back and you quickly get off that road. That is long before the frontal lobe, the part of the rational thought, has identified what it is. And some of you may have experienced that if you're driving along and suddenly the car in front of you stops and you swerve to avoid it, it hasn't gone through your brain, oh, the car in front is stopping. You've literally reacted to the situation and you moved away. Now, it's only when, through long-term memory, the hippocampus, that part of the brain, helps us regulate that in our long-term memory. And also, the amygdala and the hippocampus work together. So our best emotions, and this is interesting, our best memories in our long-term memories are where the greatest emotions are. So that means for a customer. The customer is more likely to remember us around the emotion we gave to them, rather than some of the facts. The emotion comes first, and then the facts come later as a result of it. That's the reason why storytelling, because the general part of the story builds in the emotion part of it, are remembered much more. And the part that this plays in somebody who's a memory expert, you know, the people that can memorize a deck of cards and tell you what order those deck are in, and and do party tricks around that. The reason they do that, apparently, is because they memorize a story and put the emotion in that story as part of the way they think about it. So, let's look at some of the other bits as well. When our emotions are triggered, then there are two other areas. You can see it, the ventral tegmental area, which is another part of the limbic system, also comes into play, and that's the pleasure perception. So when we're talking to clients and we are getting pleasure from them, or they're feeling pleasure because we're interacting with them, they're laughing, or they're smiling, etc., that lowers their guard. And that cingulates gyrus, the part which is focusing attention, focus on emotionally significant events. The more emotion we have in our sales pitch in terms of their feelings about it, the more likely to remember us and the more likely they are to choose us, which is really interesting. So, This is basically, some of you may know this, is the fight, flight, or fight response. That curve moment is stepping off the curb and suddenly you see this car and you immediately act. That's called a fight, flight, or fight response. And it's due to adrenaline. It's also due to this part of our nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. And there's two parts to it, sympathetic and parasympathetic, which regulate each other. So that's the reason, because the amygdala and part of the emotional part of the brain then initiate actions in the rest of our body, and most of us know this around adrenaline, in the sympathetic nervous system. That gets us to move out of the way very, very quickly and possibly feel a bit sick afterwards because our stomach has stopped because of the adrenaline that's running in our body. Now, what significance, I hear you ask, has this got within selling? Significance is this: neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters that flow between different neurons in our brain are really, really important in rapport. And there are four basically here. And here they are, all the smiley faces. There's dopamine, which motivates us. We want our clients to be motivated to do things with us. Serotonin makes, we want them to feel significant and important. We want them to feel respected as well. Now, endorphins is an easy one. We want them to, interesting one. It's similar to morphine. It's an opiate, or type of opiate that diminishes perception of pain. And this is the endorphins of what you feel. If you've been for a long run and feel good about yourself, or been to the gym and feel good about yourself afterwards, that's the kind of thing that endorphins are important for. But the key one of all of them is something called oxytocin. Those of you who know something about neuroscience will probably remember this, but this is the one that builds bonding. It creates intimacy, trust, and healthy relationships. It's so important, in fact, that it's said to be part of the entire bonding process between two couples and also a parent and child. It's really, really important. These hormones can show to release when people are in love. I'm not saying you should love your clients, but basically it's quite important to build the trust beforehand, which oxytocin is flowing. You want them to feel all of these things, and you also want them to bond with you, because the oxytocin builds long-term relationships with people. And this is the importance of that particular hormone. And we've inherited these from early mammals. All these are flowing from early mammals, and all these go through. We just develop them a bit further in terms of what we do as human beings. Now, the reason this is important, the first thing that goes through somebody's mind, back to the adrenaline rush, back to that amygdala response, that instantaneous fight, flight, or fight response is this person a threat? When you first meet somebody, you don't know anything about them. Well, you might do. Obviously, if you've been referred by somebody, that helps dramatically. But if you're, for instance, if you're cold calling somebody, the first thing on that other person's mind is this person a threat? Do I have to be careful of this person? Is this person trying to sell me something? Is this person trying to manipulate me into something I don't want to do? What we want with rapport is to have this. So the person feels, oh, it's fine, I can relax. And that's the basic element of rapport. What it does, it actually reduces this critical judgment, this ability for all of us to put our defenses up. If we can establish rapport with people, it reduces those defenses. Now, so much so for that actually, as some of you may or know who have ever tried to stop smoking with a hypnotist, things like that, one of the basic fundamentals of hypnosis is the ability to get the person under hypnosis to relax. And there is an expression that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. If you don't want to be hypnotized, you can't be hypnotized because your critical judgment is up. And it's only when you relax, in other words, you go through this process of building rapport with somebody, believe them, and want this to happen, that you can actually be hypnotized. So, both in our sales conversations and also in hypnosis as well, it's really, really important. So you could say, to a certain extent, but in selling, we're a little bit of hypnotists. Well, you probably want to say that too loud to everybody, but what you're doing is creating an environment where people, instead of thinking this, is this person a threat? People are thinking that, it's fine, I can relax. And all the chemicals in the brain are supporting that. Not only do they relax, they remember, they think, they're more likely to engage with you because of all these neuroscience principles as well. So let's look at the 4 principles of rapport. We looked at what rapport is, we looked at research that what influences generally neuroscience on B2B decisions, and let's look at the 4 principles of rapport themselves. So here are the 4 principles, and you can see them up there. First one is empathy. So we're going to take each one of these in turn. Empathy, authenticity, similarity, and shared experience. Now, notice at the bottom, rapport can be learned. Now, I've often asked the question, are salespeople born or are they made? In other words, can you train people to be? And what this is basically saying, one of the basic elements is you can teach people to be more people focused and build more rapport. But there are some people who are naturally good with people. And I'd like to tell you here a little bit about a friend of mine. I've known this guy for 40 years, and we grew up as children together. We met when we were about 11, and he's been a friend of mine ever since. And at the age of 16, he left school. Decided not to continue. He was an academic, and really decided this wasn't for him. On the other side, I decided to carry on my academic career, did a degree, did some postgraduate work as well. And when I came out of the university and learning process, and my salary was probably at that time, we're talking about early 80s here, guys, worked for a pharmaceutical company, my salary was about 8,000 plus bonuses and whatever. Steve, by the time he was 22, was earning 1.5 million a year. And I studied him because I was just so fascinated by this, how we'd grown up together, very similar people. We were virtually in tune with each other as kids. And I wanted to know why he was able. Now, there's great commercial brain with him. There's no doubt about it. He made this money by selling bankrupt stock and selling it on and doing back-to-back deals and things like that. Great commercial argument about him. But I thought, actually, why is he successful? Because you have all that knowledge. And after studying him for about 10 years now, I've spent time with him learning the reasons why he is so good. And one of the fundamental things that he's really good, and I would suggest everybody may want to consider, is he is so good at establishing relationships with other people and making people feel good about themselves. They can't help but like him and want to work with him. Particularly, success breeds success. But what happened is that when he first started, he made sure that he was getting to know everybody. He was really good at what he did. And he went out and became very sociable with a lot of people. And sure enough, bit by bit, he was introduced to people who had more influence, but more savvy in the business world than himself. He learned from them, but he just carried on doing that. Now, this guy went on to establish several successful companies. And I have to say, he showed me one day his tax demand was actually more than I'd earned in my lifetime. And I've got to be honest with you, I was actually really jealous. I was pig sick. But the key thing about it is that I learned that it's so important to make people feel good about themselves. And he's one of these naturally good people. There's no doubt about it. He can walk into anywhere, and by the end of it, you can feel, actually, I really like this guy. So you don't have to be a hard businessman to be good at business. If you're really good at rapport with people, people want to work with you, and you can earn a lot of money, as this guy is absolute testament to. So let's look at those 4 elements. Let's look at empathy. Now, empathy is probably slightly misunderstood, and I always misunderstand the difference between empathy and sympathy, and we'll look at some of those elements as well. Now, Empathy is basically, and we'll look at definition, for more formal definition in a minute, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. That's the key thing. Get them talking about themselves and demonstrate your listening on some of the fundamentals of it. But there are two types of empathy. Some of the psychological research says there's perspective taking. In other words, you take the view of somebody else. That's one form of empathy. But the second, deeper one is you actually share the emotional response or show you understand the emotional response to somebody. So that's saying, oh, that must be really difficult for you. Wow, that must cause a lot of problems. You must be really sick about that, or whatever expressions you want to use. But it's actually showing you understand somebody's emotion, not only their perspective on things, their views on things. And that's the difference between the two. And back in the 90s, what the Italian neuroscientists, as you see by the site, discovered, there were actually neurons in the brain, they thought, at this time, that actually showed that we naturally empathize with others, and some people are better at this than others. But what they did was they took a group of monkeys and showed them a researcher eating a peanut. And the same parts of the brain were triggered as if they were actually eating it themselves. So they could imagine themselves eating it. And these are what they call mirror neurons. So the neuroscience then actually showed that we do have neurons in the brain. And there's also part of this that thinks that actually some, and I'll put a caveat on this, some psychopaths, some people who do atrocious things, lack the ability to show empathy with people and to have a lack of these mirror neurons. Now, that's an overgeneralization. The research is not necessarily there completely, but this is some of the thoughts around it, some of the hypotheses, shall we say, from a scientific point of view as well. And what gives you as much pleasure as food or money? Apparently, according to these researchers, these neuroscientists, talking about yourself. So what the neuroscience says is get people talking about themselves. Get them talking about their business, getting them talking about their aspirations, where they want to do, their afflictions, what they're concerned about. And that will help them feel closer to you, which is the really important bit. If we look at some of that research, listen to me, connect to me personally, really, really important. Tell me about your situation. What did you do this weekend? Now, as we'll see by the next slide, we've got to be careful about some of these questions. Because unless we build that rapport, unless we feel that we're actually genuine about it, then it can be, we can be seen as manipulating them. So active listening is really important. Making sure that you show that you've understood them, show, that you inquire about it, acknowledge, and also the feelings as well. The acknowledgement at the end of that is actually about the feelings as well, which is really important. Authenticity was what I was saying about earlier. People like people who are genuine. So you can do all of this first about identity, but unless people feel you are genuine, they think you're this. They think you're a fake, and you can tell that. When you're talking to somebody, you can tell whether they really mean it or not. And it's inbuilt to us, and you're immediately disliked. So don't fake things. Actually become genuinely interested in the person. And that's much more powerful. Third factor around rapport is similarity. The more you find common ground, and this is the basis of relationships, you think about it, all relationships that we have, the strongest relationships are where we have common ground with the person that we have that relationship with. Your best friends are generally people you have similar views, like similar things, like similar music, and things like that. It's also one of the bases of building further on to that, a relationship between two partners is that they have common ground between the longest kinds of relationships between two people who are in a relationship, shall we say, a romantic relationship, are those that they have very common ground. Yes, opposites attract, but apparently according to the research, sometimes that necessarily isn't as much. They can get you together, but doesn't necessarily bring the relationship for a length of time. And the expression often used in NLP, I like you because you're like me, is the expression often used. Find that. So applying similarity to the sales situation, find interest, what they like, see whether you're genuinely interested in the same interests, or find out more about them, why they're interested in that. And I think it's really important that you show interest in that. Now, mirroring. This is part of NLP, which is something that I personally, at one stage, thought was a bit contentious, and then I did some further research into it. Neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, said that if you mirror somebody's body language, basically you're going to get in rapport with them. However, my view is that you've got to establish something else before you start to do this, because it can seem as copying, and you've got to be careful. There is a fine line. But you can do that by looking at their body language and looking at their speech patterns and the way they interact. If you use similar words, use similar pace as well, then you can also mirror. For instance, if somebody's speaking more slowly, you may actually want to slow down your speech. Somebody speaking fast, you want to speed up your speech in the way you're talking. That will show people that you're like them and you're mirroring them. It's not necessarily sitting there and copying the way they fit. So the four things around shared experience. And this thing is about making sure that you work on the business process, defining the problem, crafting a solution, rising a strategy present, and then working collaboratively with them. Absolutely key. If we look at this story, sharing stories, and you'll know from previous experience that if you work with them a long time, you begin to develop a longer term relationship with people. And these people here, in this slide here, had a very strong common bond between them and this story, that one was a cancer survivor and one diagnosed breast cancer, and immediately worked together. $20 billion since there, something like that. People like themselves. So, the other principle of it is to avoid arguments. Take risks, question assumptions gently, suggest ideas, and share your experience, but don't have arguments with people. It just builds, if you're hostile about it, it just breaks down that rapport totally. Pretty important. So, in conclusion to what we're doing, to invest in relationships, not only the three first things that we mentioned about the research as well, here are the fundamental four principles. Empathize, be curious about it. This is key to it. Curiosity is one of the strongest things that we have in our armament to build relationships with people. You're curious about people, then they are much more think highly of you. You listen to them and you care about them as well. And that comes across as being authentic, be real with them, have a similarity, find a common ground between them, because that will build a relationship as well as far as the business context, and share your experiences as you interact. So there we are. In an hour's time, we've run through that. I don't know, Adam, have we got any questions? I haven't seen any questions from anybody.
Yeah, so we will be running out of some time to answer some questions here. I'd like to thank everyone here for their time today and for taking part in this webinar. I will be attaching the slides to the webinar at the end of this presentation, so feel free to download them and read them at your will. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. It is not the first webinar that Tim will actually be delivering for us. He is actually back with us on the 23rd of January, so this is not the last time by any means that you will see him. But I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone for their time today. Tim, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and Adam, and good luck everybody, and if you want to connect with me at any stage, please do. If some of the elements of this you want to discuss a bit further, please do connect with me and come back to me. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you and goodbye.